Hello, welcome back to the video series where I am covering the LEED Glossary. My name is Marina Ray. I'm a LEED accredited professional with a building design and construction designation, and I'm a USGBC Pro reviewer. I worked on many LEED projects, and when I was preparing for my exam back in 2018, I was looking for something like that, and I wish this resource existed before. So for those of you who currently studying for the LEED Green Associate or LEED AP exam, I hope this will be helpful. This resource can be found for free online at usgbc.org/glossary. This is part 3. This is a 3-part video series because I did not want the videos to be too long. So if you have not watched the first and the second part, there will be links under this video. You can click on them, and the first video covers letters A through G. Then the second video is letters H through M, and this is our final part. So let us begin. NAID code, or NAED, a unique 5 or 6-digit number used to identify specific lamps used by the National Association of Electrical Distributors. Native vegetation, a species that originates in and is characteristics of a particular region, an ecosystem without direct or indirect human actions. Native species have evolved together with other species within the geography, hydrology, and climate of that region. Natural refrigerant, a compound that is not man-made and is used for cooling. Such substances generally have much lower potential for atmospheric damage than manufactured chemical refrigerants. Examples include water, carbon dioxide, and ammonia. Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, soils delineation, a US-based soil survey that shows the boundaries of different soil types and special soils features on the site. Natural site hydrology, the natural land cover function of water occurrence, distribution, movement, and balance. Net usable program area, the sum of all interior areas in the project available to house the project's program. It does not include areas for building equipment, vertical circulation, or structural components. Non-inpatient area, a public space, diagnostic or treatment area, ambulatory unit, or any other space in a healthcare facility that is not for individuals who have not been admitted for care. Non-regularly occupied space, an area that people pass through or an area used for focused activities, an average of less than 1 hour per person per day. The 1-hour time frame is continuous and should be based on the time a typical occupant uses the space. For spaces that are not used daily, the 1-hour time frame should be based on the time a typical occupant spends in the space when it is in use. Non-potable water, water that does not meet drinking water standards. Non-water toilet systems, dry plumbing fixtures and fittings that contain and treat human waste via microbiological processes. Non-water urinal, a plumbing fixture having a water flush with a trap that contains a layer of buoyant liquid that floats above the urine, blocking sewer gas and odors. Sometimes they're called waterless urinals. Occupant control, a system or switch that the person in the space can directly access and use. Examples include a task light, an open switch, and blinds. A temperature sensor, photo sensor, or centrally controlled system is not occupant controlled. Occupiable space, an enclosed space intended for human activities, excluding those spaces that are intended primarily for other purposes, such as storage rooms and equipment rooms, and that are occupied only occasionally or for short periods of time. That is according to ASHRAE 62.1-2010. Occupied space, enclosed space intended for human activities, excluding those spaces that are intended primarily for other purposes, such as storage rooms and equipment rooms, and that are only occupied occasionally and for short periods of time. Occupied spaces are further classified as regularly occupied or non-regularly occupied spaces based on the duration of the occupancy, individual or multi-occupant based on the quantity of occupants, and densely or non-densely occupied spaces based on the concentration of occupants in the space. On-site wastewater treatment, the transport, storage, treatment, and disposal of wastewater generated on the project site. Ongoing consumable, a product that has a low cost per unit and is regularly used and replaced in the course of business. Examples include paper, toner cartridges, binders, batteries, and desk accessories, also known as ongoing purchases. Open grid pavement system, pavements that consist of loose substrate supported by a grid of a more structurally sound grid or webbing. Pervious concrete and porous asphalt are not considered open grid, as they are considered bounded materials. Unbounded, loose substrate do not transfer and store heat like bound and compacted materials do. Openable window area, the free unobstructed area through the opening. Operations and Maintenance Plan, or O&M plan, a plan that specifies major system operating parameters and limits, maintenance procedures and schedules, and documentation methods necessary to demonstrate proper operation and maintenance of an approved emissions control device or system. Ornamental luminaire, a luminaire intended for illuminated portions of the circulation network that also serves an ornamental function, in addition to providing optics that effectively deliver street lighting and has a decorative or historical period appearance. Outpatient, a patient who is not hospitalized for 24 hours or more, but who visits a hospital, clinic, or associated healthcare facility for diagnosis or treatment. Owner's Project Requirements, or OPR, a written document that details the ideas, concepts, and criteria determined by the owner to be important to the success of the project. Patient position, a patient bed, infusion chair, recovery room bay, or other location where a patient receives clinical care. Peak demand, the maximum electricity load at a specific point in time or over a period of time. Peak watering months, the month with the greatest deficit between evapotranspiration and rainfall. This is the month when the plants in the site's region potentially require the most supplemental water, typically a midsummer month. This is according to the Sustainable Sites Initiative. Permanent interior obstruction, a structure that cannot be moved by the user without tools or assistance from special trades and facilities management. Examples include lab hoods, fixed partitions, demountable opaque full or partial height partitions, some displays, and equipment. Permanent peak load shifting, the transfer of energy consumption to off-peak hours when demand for power is lower and energy is therefore less expensive. Permeable pavement, a paved surface that allows water runoff to infiltrate into the ground. Persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemical, a substance that poses a long-term risk to both humans and the environment because it remains in the environment for long periods, increases in concentration as it moves up the food chain, and can travel far from the source of contamination. Often these substances can become more potent and harmful to ecosystems the longer they persist. You can read more about that at the US EPA's website on persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals. Go to www.epa.gov/PBT/. Place of respite, an area that connects healthcare patients, visitors, and staff to health benefits of the natural environment. This is adapted from Green Guide for Healthcare Places of Respite Technical Brief. Plug load or receptacle load, the electrical current drawn by all equipment that is connected to the electrical system via a wall outlet. Post-consumer recycled content, a waste generated by households or commercial, industrial, and institutional facilities in their role as end users of a product that can no longer be used for its intended purpose. Potable water, water that meets or exceeds U.S. Environmental Protection Agency or EPA drinking water quality standards, or a local equivalent outside the U.S., and is approved for human consumption by the state or local authorities having jurisdiction. It may be supplied from wells or municipal water systems. Power distribution unit output, the electrical power from a device that allocates power to and serves the information technology or IT equipment. Power distribution unit, PDU, output does not include efficiency losses of any transformation that occurs within the PDU, but it can include downstream non-IT ancillary devices installed in IT racks, such as fans. If the PDU system supports non-IT equipment, for example, computer room air conditioning units, computer room air handlers, in-row coolers, and so on, this equipment must be metered and subtracted from the PDU output reading. The metering approach should be consistent with the metering required for the power usage efficiency or PUE category. For example, continuous consumption metering for PUE categories 1, 2, and 3. Power utilization effectiveness or PUE, a measure of how efficiently a data center uses its power, specifically how much power is used by computing equipment rather than for cooling and other overhead. Powered floor maintenance equipment, electric and battery-powered floor buffers and burnishers. It does not include equipment used in wet applications. Pre-consumer recycled content, matter diverted from the waste stream during the manufacturing process, determined as the percentage of material by weight. Examples include planer shavings, sawdust, bagasse, walnut shells, culls, trimmed materials, overissue publications, and obsolete inventories. The designation excludes rework, regrind, or scrap materials capable of being reclaimed within the same process that generated them, formerly known as post-industrial content. Preferred parking. The parking spots closest to the main entrance of a building, exclusive of spaces designated for handicapped persons. For employee parking, it refers to the spots that are closest to the entrance used by employees. Premature obsolescence, the wearing out or disuse of components or materials whose service life exceeds their design life. For example, a material with a potential life of 30 years is intentionally designed to last only 15 years, such that its remaining 15 years of service is potentially wasted. In contrast, components whose service life is the same as their expected use are utilized to their maximum potential. Previously developed, altered by paving, construction, and/or land use that would typically have required regulatory permitting to have been initiated, alterations may exist now or in the past. Land that is not previously developed and landscapes altered by current or historical clearing or filling, agriculture or forestry use, or preserved natural area use are considered undeveloped land. The date of previous development permit issuance constitutes the date of previous development, but permit issuance in itself does not constitute previous development. Previously developed site, a site that prior to the project consisted of at least 75% previously developed land. Previously disturbed, areas that have been graded, compacted, cleared, previously developed, or disturbed in any way. These are areas that do not qualify as greenfield. Prime farmland, land that has the best combination of physical and chemical characteristics for producing food, feed, forage, fiber, and oilseed crops that is available for these uses, as determined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, a US-based methodology that sets criteria for highly productive soil. For a complete description of what qualifies as prime farmland, see the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, Title VII, Volume 6, Part 400 to 699, Section 657.5. Private meter, a device that measures water flow and is installed downstream from the public water supply meter or as part of an on-site water system maintained by the building management team. Process energy, power resources consumed in support of a manufacturing, industrial, or commercial process other than conditioning spaces and maintaining comfort and amenities for building occupants of a building. It may include refrigeration equipment, cooking and food preparation, clothes washing, and other major support appliances, according to ASHRAE. Process load of or unregulated load, the load on a building resulting from the consumption or release of process energy, according to ASHRAE. Process water, water that is used for industrial processes and building systems, such as cooling towers, boilers, and chillers. It can also refer to water used in operational processes, such as dishwashing, clothes washing, and ice making. Product or permanently installed building product. An item that arrives on the project site either as a finished element ready for installation or as a component to another item assembled on site. The product unit is defined by the functional requirement for use in the project. That this includes the physical components and services needed to serve the intended function of the permanently installed building product. In addition, similar product within a specification each contributes as a separate product. Project electrical load. The project load includes electric power delivered to metered customers, buildings, or loads within the project boundary, including the electric power required to centrally produce other energy delivered to customers, buildings, or loads within the project boundary, such as chiller loads. This does not include parasitic loads such as transmission and distribution losses or reactive power compensation. Public water supply, or PWS, a system for the provision to the public of water for human consumption through pipes or other constructed conveyances. To be considered public, such system must have at least 15 service connections or regularly serve at least 25 individuals. This is adapted from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. Rainwater harvesting, the capture, diversion, and storage of rain for future beneficial use. Typically, a rain barrel or cistern stores the water. Other components include the catchment surface and conveyance system. The harvested rainwater can be used for irrigation. Raw material, the basic substance from which products are made, such as concrete, glass, gypsum, masonry, metals, recycled materials, such as plastics and metals, oil, such as petroleum, polylactic acid, stone, agri-fiber, bamboo, and wood. Reclaimed water, wastewater that has been treated and purified for reuse. Recycled content, defined in accordance with the International Organization of Standards document ISO 14021, environmental labels and declarations, self-declared environmental claims, Type 2 environmental labeling. Reference evapotranspiration rate, the amount of water lost from a specific vegetated surface with no moisture limitation. Turf grass with height of 120 millimeters is the reference vegetation. Reference soil, a soil native to the project site as described in Natural Resources Conservation Service soil surveys, or a local equivalent survey outside the US, or undisturbed native soils within the project's region that have native vegetation, topography, and soil textures similar to the project site. For project sites with no existing soil, reference soils are defined as undisturbed native soils within the project's region that support appropriate native plant species similar to those intended for the new project. Refurbished material, an item that has completed its life cycle and is prepared for reuse without substantial alteration of its form. Refurbishing involves renovating, repairing, restoring, or generally improving the appearance, performance, quality, functionality, or value of a product. Regularly occupied space, enclosed areas where people normally spend time, defined as more than 1 hour of continuous occupancy per person per day on average. The occupants may be seated or standing as they work, study, or perform their activities. For spaces that are not used daily, the classification should be based on the time a typical occupant spends in the space when it is in use. Regularly used exterior entrance. A frequently used means of gaining access to a building. Examples include the main building entrance as well as any building entryways attached to parking structures, underground parking garages, underground pathways, or outside spaces. Atypical entrances, emergency exits, atriums, connection between concourses, and interior spaces are not included. Regulated load. Any building end use that has either a mandatory or a prescriptive requirement in ANSI or ASHRAE or IES Standard 90.1 2010. Remanufactured product. An item that has been repaired or adjusted and returned to service. A remanufactured product can be expected to perform as if it were new. Renewable energy. Energy sources that are not depleted by use. Examples include energy from sun, wind, and small, low-impact hydropower, plus geothermal energy and wave and tidal systems. Renewable Energy Credit, or REC. A tradable commodity representing proof that a unit of electricity was generated from a renewable source. RECs are sold separately from electricity itself and thus allow the purchase of green power by a user of conventionally generated electricity. Reuse. Materials. The reemployment of materials in the same or a related capacity as their original application, thus extending the lifetime of materials that would otherwise be discarded. Reuse includes the recovery and reemployment of materials recovered from existing building or construction sites, also known as salvage. And also water, the practice of using water that has already been used. The terms reclaimed water, reused water, and recycled water are used interchangeably in the water industry. Reused area, the total area of the building structure, core, and envelope that existed in the prior condition and remains in the completed design. Revenue grade meter, a measurement tool designed to meet strict accuracy standards required by code or law. Utility meters are often called revenue grade because their measurement directly results in a change to the customer. Salvaged material, a construction component recovered from existing buildings or construction sites and reused. Common salvaged materials include structural beams and posts, flooring, doors, cabinetry, brick, and decorative items. School authority, the authority responsible for decision-making about school operations, districts, personnel, financing, and future development. Examples include school boards, local governments, and religious institutions. Scope 1 emissions. Direct greenhouse gas emissions from sources owned or controlled by the entity, such as emissions from the fossil fuels burned on site. Electricity produced on site through the burning of fossil fuels is measured by the Scope 1 emissions associated with that fossil fuel. Scope 2 emissions. Indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated with the generation of purchased electricity, heating or cooling, or stream off-site through a utility provider for the entity's consumption. SDA 350%. The percentage of analysis points across the analysis area that meet or exceed this 300 lux value for at least 50% of the analysis period. Server input. The information technology or IT load as measured at the point of connection, for example, power receptacle, of the IT device to the electrical power system. Server input captures the actual power load of the IT device exclusive of any power distribution losses and non-IT loads, such as rack-mounted fans. Service life. The assumed length of time that a building, product, or assembly will be operational for the purposes of a life cycle assessment. Shared multi-occupant space, a place of congregation or where occupants pursue overlapping or collaborative tasks. Shell space, an area designed to be fitted out for future expansion. Shell space is enclosed by the building envelope, but otherwise left unfinished. Short-term bicycle storage. Non-enclosed bicycle parking typically used by visitors for a period of 2 hours or less. Simple box energy model and analysis, also known as building massing model energy analysis. A simple base case energy analysis that informs the team about the building's likely distribution of energy consumption and is used to evaluate potential project energy strategies. A simple box analysis uses a basic schematic building form. Site assessment, an evaluation of an area's above ground and subsurface characteristics, including its structures, geology, and hydrology. Site assessments typically help determine whether contamination has occurred and the extent and concentration of any release of pollutants. Remediation decisions rely on information generated during site assessments. Site master plan, an overall design or development concept for the project and associated or potentially associated buildings and sites. The plan considers future sustainable use, expansion, and contraction. The site master plan is typically illustrated with building plans, if applicable, site drawings of planned phase development, and narrative descriptions. Soft space, an area whose functions can be easily changed. For example, hospital administrative offices could be moved so this soft space could be converted into a laboratory. In contrast, a lab with specified equipment and infrastructure would be difficult to relocate. Softscape, the elements of a landscape that consist of life, horticultural elements. Solar garden or community renewable energy system. Shared solar array or other renewable energy system with grid-connected subscribers who receive credit for the use of renewables using virtual net metering. This is adapted from solargardens.org. Solar reflectance, or SR, the fraction of solar energy that is reflected by a surface on a scale of 0 to 1. Black paint has a solar reflectance of 0. White paint, titanium dioxide, has a solar reflectance of 1. The standard technique for its determination uses spectrophotometric measurements with an integrating sphere to determine the reflectance at each wavelength. Determine the SR of a material by using the Cool Roof Rating Council standard, or CRRC1. Solar Reflectance Index, or SRI. a measure of the constructed surface's ability to stay cool in the sun by reflecting solar radiation and emitting thermal radiation. It is defined such that a standard black surface, initial solar reflectance of 0.05, initial thermal emittance is 0.90, has an initial SRI of 0, and a standard white surface, initial solar reflectance is 0.80, initial thermal emittance is 0.90, has an initial SRI of 100. To calculate the SRI for a given material, obtain its solar reflectance and thermal emittance via the Cool Roof Rating Council standard, or CRRC1. SRI is calculated according to ASTM E1980. Calculation of the aged SRI is based on the age-tested values of solar reflectance and thermal emittance. Sound level coverage, a set of uniformity criteria that ensure consistent intelligibility and directionality of audible frequencies for all occupants within a space. Source reduction, a decrease in the amount of unnecessary material brought into a building in order to produce less waste. For example, purchasing products with less packaging is a source reduction strategy. Spatial daylight autonomy, or SDA, a metric describing annual sufficiency of ambient daylight levels in interior environments. It is defined as the percentage of an analysis area, the area where calculations are performed, typically across an entire space, that meets a minimum daylight illuminance level for a specified fraction of the operating hours per year. For example, the daylight autonomy value following Reinhardt and Walkenhorst 2001. The illuminance level and time fraction are included as subscripts, as in SDA 350%. The ADA value is expressed as a percentage of area. Speech privacy, a condition in which speech is unintelligible to casual listeners, according to ANSI T1 523 2001. Speech spectra, the distribution of acoustic energy as a function of frequency for human speech. Streetcar, a transit service with small individual rail cars. Spacing between stations is uniformly short and ranges from every block to a quarter of a mile, and operating speeds are primarily between 10 and 30 miles per hour, or between 15 and 50 kilometers per hour. Streetcar routes typically extend 2 to 5 miles, or 3 to 8 kilometers. Structure, elements carrying either vertical or horizontal loads, for example, walls, roofs, and floors, that are considered structurally sound and non-hazardous. Systems Manual provides the information needed to understand, operate, and maintain the systems and assemblies within a building. It expands the scope of the traditional operating and maintenance documentation and is compiled of multiple documents developed during the commissioning process, such as the owner's project requirements, or OPR, operations and maintenance manuals, or O&M manuals, and sequence of operation. Technical Release, or TR55, an approach to hydrology in which watersheds are modeled to calculate storm water runoff volume, peak rate of discharge, hydrographs, and storage volumes, developed by the former USDA Soil Conservation Service. Thermal emittance, the ratio of the radiant heat flux emitted by a specimen to that emitted by a blackbody radiator at the same temperature adapted from cool roof rating council. 3-year aged SR or SRI value, a solar reflectance or solar reflectance index rating that is measured after 3 years of weather exposure. Time of use pricing, an arrangement in which customers pay higher fees to use utilities during peak time periods and lower fees during off-peak time periods. Undercover parking, vehicle storage that is underground, under deck, under roof, or under a building. Uninterruptible power supply output or UPS output, the electricity provided by a unit that keeps information technology or IT equipment functioning during a power outage. UPS output does not include efficiency losses from the unit itself, but does include losses from downstream electrical distribution components, such as power distribution units, and it may include non-IT ancillary devices installed in IT racks, such as fans. If the UPS system supports non-IT equipment, such as computer room air conditioning units, computer room air handlers, in-row coolers, and so on, this usage must be metered and subtracted from the UPS output reading. The metering approach should be consistent with the metering required for the power usage efficiency or PUE category. For example, continuous consumption metering for PUE categories 1, 2, and 3. Universal waste, hazardous items that are easily purchased and commonly used. Examples include batteries, pesticides, mercury-containing equipment, and light bulbs. See epa.gov/OSW/hazard/waste types/universal/index.htm. Unoccupied space, an area designed for equipment, machinery, or storage rather than for human activities. An equipment area is considered unoccupied only if retrieval of equipment is occasional. Upstream equipment, a heating or cooling system or control associated with the district energy system or DES, but not part of the thermal connection or interface with the DES. Upstream equipment includes the thermal energy conversion plant and all the transmission and distribution equipment associated with the transporting the thermal energy to the project building or site. USDA Organic, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's certification for products that contain at least 95% ingredients, excluding water and salt, produced without synthetic chemicals, antibiotics, or hormones. Any remaining ingredients must consist of USDA-approved non-agricultural substances or agricultural products that are not commercially available in organic form. Vertical illuminance. Illuminance levels calculated at a point on a vertical surface or that occur on a vertical plane. Vision glazing, the glass portion of an exterior window that permits views to the exterior or interior. Vision glazing must allow a clear image of the exterior and must not be obstructed by fritz, fibers, pattern glazing, or added tints that distort color balance. Walking distance, the distance that a pedestrian must travel between origins and destinations without obstruction in a safe and comfortable environment on a continuous network of sidewalks, all-weather surface footpaths, crosswalks, or equivalent pedestrian facilities. The walking distance must be drawn from an entrance that is accessible to all building users. Waste diversion, a management activity that disposes of waste through methods other than incineration or landfilling. Examples include reuse and recycling. Waste to energy, the conversion of non-recyclable waste materials into usable heat, electricity, or fuel through a variety of processes, including combustion, gasification, pyrolyzation, anaerobic digestion, and landfill gas or LPG recovery. Wastewater, water that has been used for a purpose and conveyed by building plumbing systems toward a point of treatment and disposal. Wastewater from buildings can be classified as gray water, black water, or process wastewater. Water body, the surface water of a stream, first order and higher, including intermittent streams, arroyo, river, canal, lake, estuary, bay, or ocean. It does not include irrigation ditches. Water budget, a project-specific method of calculating the amount of water required by the building and associated grounds. The budget takes into account indoor, outdoor, process, and makeup water demands and any on-site supply, including estimated rainfall. Water budgets must be associated with a specified amount of time, such as a week, month, or year, and a quantity of water, such as kilogallons or liters. Wet meter, a device installed inside a water pipe to record the volume of passing water. Wetland, an area that is inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater at a frequency and duration sufficient to support, and that under normal circumstances does support a prevalence of vegetation typically adapted for life in saturated soil conditions. Wetlands generally include swamps, marshes, bogs, and similar areas, but exclude irrigation ditches unless delineated as part of an adjacent wetland. Wood, plant-based materials that are eligible for certification under the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC. Examples include bamboo and palm, or monocots, as well as hardwoods, or angiosperms, and softwoods, gymnosperms. Xeriscaping, landscaping that does not require routine irrigation. Yard tractor, a vehicle used primarily to facilitate the movement of truck, trailers, and other types of large shipping containers from one area of a site to another. It does not include forklift trucks, also known as terminal tractor, yard truck, utility tractor, yard goat, or yard hustler. Zero lot line project, a plot whose building footprint typically aligns or nearly aligns with the site limits. So this, my friends, wraps up our LEED glossary. Please feel free to leave a comment under the video if you feel this helpful and if this glossary helped you in your preparation for the exam. And if you pass the exam, just drop me a line, and I wish you the best of luck in all your exams from now on. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my other videos.